Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago Opposition's media briefing for Sunday, the 14th of April, 2024. The spike in infant mortality and the TTRA. Today, our presenters are MP Dr. Lackram Bodoe, Shadow for Health, and Senator Wade Mark, Leader of Opposition Business in the Senate. Thank you for joining us. We will begin shortly. Please share the live.
Good morning to the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to the media briefing of the United National Congress. May I take this opportunity on behalf of the leadership of our great and glorious party to welcome all of you who are looking at this live broadcast at home in Trinidad and Tobago and abroad. We are streaming live from the United National Congress's headquarters here in Shogunas, Mulchan, Suchan Road. This morning, we will be addressing two very critically important subjects that are engaging the attention of the people of our great republic. Those subjects or topics are the recent tragic passing of some 7 babies. From our research, 6 beautiful girls who could have become very great contributors to Trinidad and Tobago's national effort as it relates to development and transformation. And of course, one boy ranging between 5 days in terms of life and 1 month. They were only allowed to live due to no fault of theirs between 5 days and 1 month. We will then proceed to deal with the politicization of revenue collection, of taxes, customs, and duties, amounting to some 90% of the total revenues of Trinidad and Tobago, which will now be under the direct control of the cabinet, headed by Dr. Rowley and the criminal gang posing as a government. We will talk about that. We will speak to the recent announcement by the governor of the central bank that we are to expect a new $100 note by December of 2024. And we will look at what I call the donkey logic of the Attorney General on the abduction and kidnapping of Brent Thomas. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, the United National Congress is razor focused on bringing about salvation to this nation from the cruel, brutal regime of this Rowley-led administration. We are about emancipating, liberating our nation from the oppression of this criminal administration when the next election is called in our nation. So to address the passing, the tragic deaths of these 7 innocent babies will be our minister with responsibility for health in the shadow cabinet of the alternative government, the incoming government, the government in waiting, which is the United National Congress, headed by our illustrious and esteemed political leader who will be this country's next prime minister. To address this issue is our shadow minister of health, the Honorable Dr. Lackram Bodoe, MP for Fyzabad. And later on, I will deal with the subversion of revenue collection in Trinidad and Tobago and the invasion and incursion of privacy rights by this criminal PNM administration. And I'll deal with other matters, as I said, later on. So I want to welcome you to this very important press briefing of the United National Congress. And I want to take this opportunity to invite my distinguished colleague, the Honorable Lackram Bodoe, who will now address you on the tragic passing of these 7 innocent babies a few days ago. Dr. Lackram Bodoe, you are now welcome to address the nation and the world at this time.
Thank you very much, the my colleague in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, Senator the Honorable Wade Mark, a very, very formidable advocate on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago in the Parliament. Good morning again to members of the media and to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who are watching this broadcast on the various platforms. A very warm welcome again to the opposition leaders' Sunday morning press briefing. And again, I thank you for joining us as we deal with some very important matters this morning. As has been our regular practice, we in the opposition use this opportunity to bring to the national community issues which affect their daily lives. We highlight the shortcomings of this government in all spheres of life in our country. And we further assure you that when the United National Congress is voted into government, as we will in the very near future, we will take immediate steps to mitigate against these issues, as our commitment is to secure a much improved, sustainable quality of life for all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We examine and analyze the issues that are affecting you, the citizens, using the best information available to us. And we call upon the government to account both inside and outside the Parliament on a daily basis. Ladies and gentlemen, our country is in a perilous state due to the non-performance of this government in many key sectors, but especially in the areas of national security, the economy, and the healthcare sector. As we try to recover from the ravages of COVID-19, which was badly managed by this government, as evidenced in the Simangal report, many of the recommendations which are still to be implemented, and we will deal with that at another time, we again face a crisis in the health sector. This time, it is a crisis in the NICU, the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit at the Port of Spain General Hospital, under the watch of the Northwest Regional Health Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, the population was awakened to the worrisome and totally heart-wrenching headlines on Friday morning on the front pages of both the Trinidad Guardian and the Express. The Express of Friday, April 12, 2024. And I read, NWRHA confirms bacterial outbreak at Port of Spain General Hospital. 7 babies die. This is the headline on Friday of the Express, the Daily Express. On the same day, Friday, April 12, 2024, another headline, this time the Trinidad Guardian, and the headline, unfortunately, is 7 babies die at Port of Spain General Hospital. And the subheadings is that NWRHA confirms deaths due to infections, announces immediate closure of NICU to prevent further spread, and heartbroken parents demand probe. Ladies and gentlemen, it is seldom that the same news item is on the front page of both newspapers on the same day. So it tells you the extent of this heartbreaking tragedy that occurred at the NICU of the Port of Spain General Hospital. This is a very painful morning for me, not only as the opposition shadow MP for Health, but as a former chairman of the SWRHA and as a medical doctor for some 40 years. As an obstetrician gynecologist for some 34 years, I care for pregnant women and deliver their babies. I understand their hopes and aspirations and their anxiety. I can certainly understand the anguish, despair, and disappointment that the mothers of these 7 dead babies are feeling this morning. At this point, I wanted, on behalf of myself, and of course on behalf of the United National Congress and our political leader, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, in whose heart she holds children very dearly, I want to express our deepest condolences to the bereaved parents of these 7 babies. Ladies and gentlemen, the pain and anguish of these parents is highlighted, and I take the opportunity to read briefly from the newspapers citing the pain and anguish that these parents would have experienced. And I read from The Guardian of 12th of April, just a few days ago. 7 NICU babies die in less than a week as infections spread at the Port of Spain General Hospital. And I quote, "One mother, who asked not to be named, wept uncontrollably as she spoke, pausing numerous times during the interview to try and compose herself. She said she did not know where to begin to come to terms with the loss of her daughter. She said she fought hard for her girl, spending a month in the hospital because of hypertension issues, and then having an emergency C-section, only for this to happen. Indeed, this is a tragic, tragic event." She started to see, speaking about her baby. She was moving. She would have been 4 weeks on Saturday. Everything was well. I held her. I spoke with her. All the tests they took showed nothing. Guardian Media also spoke with the father of a third baby girl who died. He believed that the families were not being told the truth, and I will come to that a little bit later on, ladies and gentlemen. "To tell you the truth," as I quote, "that's a real mad scene. All those babies died. It's hard, real hard." He continues, "My daughter was healthy and everything when I saw her. I went back to see her and there were all these tubes inside of her. I think they are covering up." A very serious allegation by this parent. "Something is wrong. I'll talk to my wife and decide the next step we will take, because right now everybody's just down." Very, very heart-rending indeed, ladies and gentlemen. The Guardian goes on to follow up, saying that the parents of the 7 babies who died of neonatal sepsis at the Port of Spain General Hospital's neonatal intensive care unit between April 4th and 7th said they have lost faith and confidence in the country's public health care system. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is not only a personal tragedy for the parents involved, but also a tragedy in terms of the loss of faith and confidence in the public health care system. Furthermore, they said they were unsatisfied with the explanations. These are the parents. This is not the UNC saying this. They said they were unsatisfied with the explanations given by the Northwest Regional Health Authority and Health Minister Terence Dialsing about their babies' deaths. I quote again, "Words cannot even explain. My mental health is like a serious thing right now. In my eyes, this is negligence." These are the words of a parent. So indeed, it can even affect the mental health of these grieving parents. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I move on, let's talk a bit about the NICU, because this has been in the news now for the last few days. I worked in the NICU for some 15 months, so I would have some experience of what happens in the NICU. I know about procedures and protocols when it comes to dealing with sick, premature, vulnerable babies. And I suspect, and I believe the population also suspects that better could have been done for these babies at the NICU in the Port of Spain General Hospital. Now, let's examine a little bit, these babies, what we are talking about in a NICU. We are talking about sick neonates who are very vulnerable. A neonate is defined as an infant, as a baby between birth and 1 month of life. So they're uniquely vulnerable to what we call nosocomial infections. And I want to explain that. That is infections that are transmitted to these babies, sometimes by poor conditions in the NICU, sometimes by healthcare workers. So these babies are very vulnerable because they have an immature immune system. They can be given broad spectrum antibiotics. They have frequent contact with healthcare workers, and this is a very important point because this is where the issue of hand hygiene and sanitization in NICU becomes very important. And they're also exposed many times to invasive life-sustaining procedures and surgical procedures and so on. Sometimes these little infants have to be what we call intubated. They have to have a tube placed into their lungs to help them with breathing. So at every stage of the process in the care of these infants, great care and precaution and caution has to be taken to ensure that everything is done to ensure that a sterile environment is is in place to care for these infants, from the washing of the hands to the proper sterilization of everything and every piece of equipment that is used in a neonatal intensive care unit. Ladies and gentlemen, a government who is engaged, a government which is caring, a government with the best interests of the citizens at the core of its philosophy, knows that a well-resourced and properly managed NICU can literally make the difference between life and death for these vulnerable children who are totally dependent on others for their safety and care. On every single occasion, Minister Dayal Singh brags about his management of the health sector. So this morning I asked, ladies and gentlemen, is the death of 7 babies in 4 days acceptable? And I leave the answer to you, for the population, to judge. As a medical professional, I highly suspect that this is acceptable. So we have to ask the question, so what NICU infection prevention and control protocols and practices were breached? Surely something must have been breached for 7 infants to die within a 4-day period. I noted before that the commonest measures are hand hygiene and patient isolation. Now, there are many theories coming out in the newspaper. There's a report of a mother who had known infection, whose baby was, admitted to the NICU. Now, nothing is wrong with that. The NICU is designed to admit every sick infant. It is the responsibility of those in charge of the NICU to ensure that even if a sick infant with a known infection is admitted, that all measures are taken to prevent that infection from being transmitted. So I wanted to make that point. The report, the press release from the NWRHA identified 3 of the organisms responsible. I will not go into the technical detail except to say that these 3 bacteria are well recognized as causes of what we call hospital-borne infection. But more than that, because these are the common causes, these bacteria are resistant to many antibiotics. So when these infants become infected with these particular bacteria, it becomes more difficult to treat them. The point I'm making, ladies and gentlemen, is that it is far easier to prevent these infants from getting these bacterial infections than to treat them. So the question has to be asked, are the resources adequate? Are adequate resources being provided at the NICU? Is it that sterilizers are in short supply at the Northwest Regional Health Authority? Is it true that the linen and other materials that need to be sterilized sometimes have to be moved between different facilities? Is it an issue of poor sanitation? Is it true that there was discovered a site of infection under some sink? I trust that the investigation that the minister promised will give the answers to these questions. Ladies and gentlemen, I empathize with the healthcare staff, the hardworking doctors and nurses who have to work under very difficult conditions under this government. And I want to ask, in terms of protocol, and we talk about the resources, and we talk about the human resources, and I want to ask whether there is adequate staffing at the NICU in terms of the number of nurses available. So what is the standard? Allow me to refer to a report, and this is a report of the Maternity Services Review Committee, which was sent into the Ministry of Health in 2013, and which this government has access to, this present Minister of Health has access to. And although some of the recommendations have been implemented, there is one recommendation here that stands out, ladies and gentlemen, and this speaks to the increasing of resources, and this was a recommendation. And the recommendation was that the neonatal nurse-to-patient ratio at the NICU is recommended to be 1-to-1 for ventilated neonates, meaning those infants that have support of a respirator, 1-to-2 for high dependency neonates, and 1-to-4 for special care babies. I note a release in the newspaper from Mr. E.D. Stewart of the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, asking questions about the shortages of nurses throughout the health sector, and in particular in the NICU. Because if these vulnerable infants are not given proper, in some cases they need one-to-one support, then of course the outcome is not always good. I will come back to this report, ladies and gentlemen, as we go on. So I ask whether these recommendations have been implemented. This report is some 10 years old, and the question really is whether adequate resources, staffing and otherwise, are provided to the hardworking nurses and doctors who work in our nation's hospitals. So, ladies and gentlemen, I come to the issue of accountability, because surely this situation cannot go unchecked. Surely something happened. Somewhere something fell down. Somebody fell down on the job. And therefore, I am calling on the Minister of Health to immediately come before the public, the parents, the staff of the health sector, and to inform us truthfully of what he knows and when did he know it. Because these reports came out several days after the incidents happened. And of course, the population is wondering whether things are back to normal, whether it is safe for their infants and their neonates to be housed at the NICU at the Port of Spain General Hospital. As mentioned before, there seems to be a loss of confidence, not only amongst the mothers who have already delivered their babies, but amongst the pregnant women, who are booked to deliver at the Port of Spain General Hospital and wondering should their infant require hospitalization at the NICU, whether it is safe. So it creates really a matter of serious concern to pregnant women and those who care for them. So we are calling upon the government to account fully and truthfully in Parliament. In fact, when this news broke on Thursday night on one of the TV stations and came out in the media last Friday, I filed an urgent question on behalf of the party asking for an update on the situation. Unfortunately, that question was not answered directly by the minister. He went on to make a statement, which I will come to. But more than that, ladies and gentlemen, I also filed a request for leave to move the adjournment of the House under Standing Order 17. This is an avenue for the opposition available to us in the Parliament to try to raise these matters. And I will share this release with you, members of the media. But basically, a case was made to say that the matter was definite because it pertains specifically to confirmation from the Northwest Regional Health Authority via their media release that there was a bacterial outbreak at the NICU. We made a case saying that the matter was urgent because there is a necessity for immediate and sustained action to be taken by the NWRHA to prevent an impending epidemic of neonatal deaths at a public health facility. And we made a case saying that the matter is of public importance because it concerns the life, health, and safety of newborn babies, in particular premature births. Unfortunately, the opportunity was not afforded opposition members to debate as an urgent matter. But nevertheless, we will continue to pursue this matter both in and out of the Parliament, as I say. So the minister, on the same sitting on Friday, went on to make a statement, which I had the opportunity to analyze. And ladies and gentlemen, it appears that this statement really was just a rehash of the statement issued by the NWRHA, providing nothing new except to say that an investigation would be launched under the supervision of the Chief Medical Officer. And whilst we welcome any investigation, we want to say here that any such report must be finished in a timely manner. We don't want this urgent matter to be swept under the carpet, so we're asking for a very timely report on this. This report must clearly outline the steps to limit and prevent recurrence. And this report must restore faith and trust in the population. It must not be a cover-up, as many of the affected parents are intimating. This report, we are calling for this report to identify the shortfalls and provide all resources to fix this, and to hold those responsible accountable. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that NICU beds are a scarce and valuable resource. In the very best of times, there are never enough beds. To deny one baby is to condemn that baby to almost certain death. Today, I don't speak only as a member of parliament, but as a parent, a father, a medical doctor, who has had the privilege to bring thousands of lives into this world. I have had the greatest honor to watch many grow and thrive. Indeed, some of them have already qualified as doctors themselves. And therefore, to have babies die in the NICU under these circumstances is indeed a great tragedy. In today's newspapers, we see a class action suit being filed on behalf of the aggrieved parents of these 7 babies against the NWRHA by the law firm of Freedom Law Chambers. This will cost the taxpayers millions of dollars if the NWRHA is found negligent in this matter. I am saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, that this money could have been better spent on providing the additional resources for our hard-working healthcare staff to better meet the many other needs of the citizens in the healthcare sector. But, ironically, ladies and gentlemen, very ironically, in today's newspaper, where the headlines again speak to the issue involving these 7 babies, the deaths of these 7 babies, I saw a full-page ad paid for by the NCRHA, the North Central Regional Health Authority. So here you have a crisis in WRHA, and then you have a full-page ad. And I invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to look at this full-page ad, which would have cost surely thousands of dollars. And when I saw a full-page ad, I was hoping that this full-page ad would speak to something like, there is now a reduction of waiting time for urgent surgeries at the NCRHA. There is now better situation in casualty. There is now a better situation with beds, that patients do not have to wait for beds. There is a better situation now with regards to the shortage of drugs and supplies. But lo and behold, this full-page ad, ladies and gentlemen, this full-page ad has all of about 4 lines. Over 50,000 more attendances in A&E between 2021 and 2023. I don't know what is the significance of that. And it goes on to state the figures. And it shows that this government is concerned about numbers and not necessarily of quality. And the Minister of Health himself seems to be taking that road. But I will leave that there for the time, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say that this latest saga at the Port of Spain General Hospital is another sign of a collapsed health sector under this government. This is a government that, in addition to destroying what the People's Partnership government left for the people of Trinidad and Tobago in the health sector, and the population needs to be reminded of the Couva Hospital, it was delivered in 2015 and is yet to be made fully available to the population of Trinidad and Tobago, except, of course, engaged during the time of the COVID pandemic. The full employment of doctors and nurses. Now we have 500 unemployed doctors waiting, many shortage of nurses. We had the extended opening hours at the nation's health centers, and we had adequate drugs and supplies. But we also had a plan to deal with maternal and neonatal mortality, and we were making some progress in that regard. And I already pointed out to you the maternity services report. This was commissioned by then Prime Minister Kamala Bissessa in 2011. The report, I had the privilege and honor of chairing the committee, a very diverse committee of professionals, and we came up a report, which has already had some impact in terms of improving maternal and neonatal mortality. And of course, this very latest incident reverses many of the gains that Trinidad and Tobago would have made during the last 10 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, Minister Dayal Singh seems to be obsessed with figures. He speaks about neonatal mortality rates, but he doesn't speak too much about quality. And, it was interesting, ladies and gentlemen, as I come to a close, to read from the Hansard a debate which took place on the 26th of January 2024. This was the minister responding to a motion brought by the opposition about the issues and the ills in the health sector. And this is Minister Dialsing, and I quote, "Our greatest asset is our children. Under my tenure as Minister of Health, infant mortality rates have dropped." I quote again, "I took personal responsibility to save our children in our hospitals. And because of my direct intervention, which started to bear fruit in the middle of 2016, so it only started in 2016 according to this minister, I have figures to show otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, there was a positive turnaround." So I want to say that at this point in time, if the minister truly believes the words that he uttered in Parliament, that he was personally responsible for the improvements in neonatal mortality in 2016, then equally he has to take personal responsibility for this tragedy at the NWRHA last week. I think it is only fair, ladies and gentlemen. So in these circumstances, he may want to consider doing the honorable thing to resign. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention. I thank you, the members of the media, and I remain available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lackram Bodoe, for sharing with the nation concerns and factors that may have led to the tragic and unfortunate passing of these 7 babies at the Port of Spain General Hospital. I just want to follow up briefly on what my distinguished colleague raised as it relates to personal responsibility. I would like to go a step further. It is not only personal responsibility. There's this concept of ministerial responsibility and accountability in the context of the Westminster system that we tend to practice. The Minister of Health cannot provide this country with a proper outcome via a report if, one, he appoints the chief medical officer to head an internal committee. We are therefore calling for the establishment of an independent, unbiased, and impartial investigation into the tragedy surrounding the deaths of these 7 babies. And the Minister of Health, who took personal responsibility in January of this year, must also do the proper thing, the decent thing, by stepping down, by removing himself from the portfolio as Minister of Health. So for us to have a proper, independent, impartial, unbiased investigation into this tragedy, the United National Congress is calling on the Minister of Health to be removed, calling on the government, the Prime Minister, to remove the Minister of Health from his portfolio and allow an independent investigation to be conducted. The blood of these innocent children is on the hands of the government. And therefore, nothing less would be required than an independent, impartial, unbiased investigation. But the minister must take personal responsibility for policy failure in this matter. And he must tender his resignation as the Minister of Health. And if he fails to do so, then the Prime Minister must replace the Minister of Health. Members of the media, as we speak, the debate has been concluded in the House of Representatives, and it is coming to the Senate in the next few hours. And what is that issue? It is 3 separate government motions to appoint through a parliamentary process the Director General of the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority and the Deputy Directors General of the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. Let me make it abundantly clear from the outset that the United National Congress is completely opposed to the TTRA. We opposed it then when it was being addressed at the Joint Select Committee, when it was debated in the Parliament, and we oppose it now through these 3 nominees that are coming for approval at the level of the Parliament. But it is important for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to understand the gravity of what we are dealing with. We have an act of Parliament called Act number 17 of 2021. This Act number 17 of 2021. This Act establishes the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. Now, members of the media, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the government has introduced the TTRA to replace the Board of Inland Revenue and the Customs and Excise Division currently located in the Ministry of Finance. But when we look at this TTRA and we look at what exists at the present time, all public officers, all employees of the Board of Inland Revenue, all the employees of the Customs and Excise Division, all the commissioners of the Board of Inland Revenue are appointed, promoted, transferred, and disciplined by the Public Service Commission. As compared to this statutory body, corporate body, established, which allows the cabinet, ladies and gentlemen, listen very carefully. The TTRA, which is replacing the Board of Inland Revenue and the Customs and Excise Division and officers, are going to be appointed, promoted, disciplined, and possibly transferred. But you know by whom? Not the Public Service Commission, but by a board management committee or a board of management appointed by whom? By the Minister of Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, under Section 7.3 of this Act, 7.1 I should say, of this Act, and 7.2 of the TTRA, the Board of Management is appointed by the Minister of Finance. Here, who are the members of the Board of Management? The chairman, I understand one, Mr. Nigel Edwards. The vice chairman, the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance, the director general, who shall be an ex officio member of the board, a person nominated by the Tobago House of Assembly, an attorney at law, a chartered or certified accountant, and 2 other persons from the private sector. These are the persons who are appointed by the Minister of Finance. And when you read their duties and responsibilities, you understand the wide-ranging powers of this Board of Management. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is happening here is this. The Minister of Finance looms large and is completely in charge of the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. He not only appoints the Board of Management, whose office holders I have just outlined, but the minister appoints the Director General of the TTRA, who is the boss running the day-to-day operations of the TTRA. So the minister appoints that person, Director General, and then he appoints 2 other office holders. The Deputy Director General, which is responsible for domestic taxes, and a Deputy Director General with responsibility for customs and excise duties. And you know what is even more shameful? These three office holders are appointed on contract. So the minister appoints on contract the Director General. He appoints on contract the Deputy Director General responsible for taxes. And he also appoints on contract the Deputy Director General with responsibility for customs and excise. Not only there, it does not stop there, rather. The Minister of Finance, who is called Imbert, who is the Member of Parliament for Diego Martin Northeast, who was a former chairman of the PNM. He fixes the terms and conditions of employment for the Director General, the Deputy Director General, both positions. And not only that, it does not end there. If the minister, in accordance with the Act, ladies and gentlemen, if this Minister of Finance is unhappy with the performance of this particular group of persons that he is appointing, the Minister of Finance can remove them. So he appoints them, he determines their terms and conditions of employment, and he can discipline those officers, all of whom are on a contractual arrangement with the Minister of Finance. Now, what kind of independence would these office holders have to the people of Trinidad and Tobago? And may I say that over 90% of the revenue of Trinidad and Tobago, taxes, stamp duties, customs duties, excise duties, corporation tax, income tax, will all be collected by contract officers. Ladies and gentlemen, may I repeat? Dr. Rowley and the cabinet will be overseeing, for the first time in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago's history, the collection, the management, the supervision of taxes in Trinidad and Tobago. All our revenues will now be under the control of the Prime Minister and his cabinet. That is what is at stake here. So they will now have as much as they may need, as much as they may wish to deny it. They will have access, ladies and gentlemen, to corporate files. They will have access to every citizen's personal income tax file. You know why they will have that access? Because they are appointing every critically important office holder to be in charge of the collection of government revenues in Trinidad and Tobago. So you know that you are familiar with the old saying those who pay the piper calls the tune, or call the tune rather. Those who pay the piper call the tune. So if Minister Imbert is fixing your contract for 5 years, and he has the power under the Act to give you direction on policy matters of a general nature, then if he tells you to jump, you have to say, Minister Imbert, how high, sir? And if you don't jump, he will come to the very parliament to remove you. That is authoritarianism. That is fascism. That is dictatorship. And that is what we are involved in. The TTRA will become a party group of the People's National Movement. I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to understand what we are dealing with here. This is very serious. There are supposed to be independent institutions under our Constitution. And what is happening under this criminal administration? The Prime Minister intercepts, and he admits that he intercepted the merit list for the appointment of a police commissioner, determined by an independent service commission. So you have a dictator intercepting notification from the Police Service Commission, and he admits it to appoint a police commissioner. So if the Prime Minister, who has admitted he did that, can do that with an independent service commission, you think they will not go into your personal file at the TTRA? Those directors that they are going to appoint, they are going to be puppets of the master puppeteer. That is what they are going to be. And your business will be in the hands of Balize House. That is why they want total and absolute control. Every part of this piece of legislation called the TTRA is controlled by the cabinet. Rowley and the PNM is in charge of the TTRA. The Director General is appointed by the Minister of Finance. The Director General, who is the boss running the day-to-day management of the operations of the TTRA, is accountable to the Minister of Finance. And you know what? They also are responsible for the appointment, disappointment, dismissal of every member of staff. That means every employee that they employ at the TTRA will be employed indirectly by the cabinet, by the Prime Minister, by implication. Because if the Director General is appointed by the Minister of Finance and accountable to the Minister of Finance and can be fired by the Minister of Finance, and that same Director General in another group can hire employees of the TTRA, is only party group, party members, and those who do not are not lucky to be party members, to be employed at the TTRA. When you become an employee there, if you don't toe the line, what do you think will happen to you? You will lose your work. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, this is totally unsatisfactory. This is unacceptable. This is indefensible. This is inexcusable. We cannot support the hijacking by the PNM of 90% of this nation's revenues by their appointing individuals who will be loyal to the PNM and by extension the cabinet, and by extension they can be transformed into a PNM party group and a PNM party branch with access to personal, private and confidential information belonging to the corporate world, small, medium, large businesses, and every taxpayer in Trinidad and Tobago, whether they're paying VAT, whether they're paying income tax, whether they're paying corporation tax, whether they're paying stamp duty, customs duties, excise duties. They have access to that. And ladies and gentlemen, may I remind you, the Central Bank Act was amended 2 years ago or 3 years ago. To do what? To reduce the term of the governor from 5 years to 3 years. You know who brought that act to be amended? The same Minister of Finance who is appointing the Director General and the Deputy Directors General. I know what was also done to the Central Bank Act. Private and confidential information can now be accessed by the Minister of Finance under these amendments, or under the amendments that came recently to weaken the central bank and to make the governor of the central bank a puppet of the Minister of Finance. That is what we are dealing with here, ladies and gentlemen. We are fighting a dictatorship. We are fighting an authoritarian. We are fighting a modern fascist who wants total and absolute control of every facet of the lives of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That is why he does not respect the separation of powers. That is why he was able to criticize publicly and openly a sitting judge of the High Court. He could do whatever he wants, whatever he wishes to do. My brothers and sisters, there is a concept called the separation of powers. If a judge hands down a decision, you can appeal it. But for a prime minister to openly criticize a judge, that is an abuse of office, an abuse of power, a disrespect, and a contempt for the separation of powers. And we totally condemn this conduct, the Prime Minister's conduct, as it relates to the separation of powers and his condemnation of the sitting judge. In fact, the Prime Minister owes an apology and should apologize for his crass behavior towards that sitting judge. totally out of place, totally rude, and his conduct totally unacceptable. And whilst we are talking about the governor of the central bank, let us deal with a certain development that has occurred recently. Everyone would have read recently, sometime in April, I think it was Thursday the 4th of April, in a newspaper article, I think it was in the Guardian, if I'm not mistaken, ladies and gentlemen, where we were told that coming to a theater near you shortly, according to this key star of that movie, the leading star of that movie being the governor of the central bank, is the production, distribution, and circulation through the banks, commercial banks that is, of a new $100 note. May I repeat? Coming to a cinema near you is a new currency, a new $100 note that is supposed to take effect from December of 2024. Courtesy the governor of the central bank, of course, supported by the Prime Minister, of course, supported by the Minister of Finance. May I remind the people of Trinidad and Tobago, less than 5 years ago, Dr. Rowley, Stuart Young, the Minister of Finance, and the Governor of the Central Bank demonetized $1 notes, $5 notes, $10 notes, $20 notes, $50 notes, and $100 notes. They did that 5 years ago. Within a few hours, they had people, the elderly, the sick, the pensioners, collapsing under the heat wave, lining up to change $1 and $2 and $3 and $1 and $5 rather than $10 and $20 and $100 notes, because they said they were fighting financial crimes. And they were moving away from what is called what? The cotton $100 note and other notes to what is called the polymer. And they said that was security proof. Nobody could have counterfeit that polymer. That is what we were told by the governor. That is what we were told by the government. And people had to change their money in order to address that. That is what happened. So everybody thought that the governor of the central bank and the government had it right. They brought new currencies that were supposed to be security proof, counterfeit proof, only to be told on Thursday the 4th of April, a new currency is coming in December of 2024. Well, I want to tell Trinidad and Tobago, yes, they are going to foist a new currency on you in 2024 December. And whilst they are bringing in a new currency, I think we need a new governor of the central bank. This governor is totally incompetent. He has to go. Are we to go through the same trials and tribulations with this new $100 note that is supposed to take effect in December of 2024? Ladies and gentlemen, do you know how much the last set of new notes issued in 2019 cost you, cost me, cost us, the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago? You know what the $100 note costs us? The new one? The $50 notes? The $20 notes? The $10? The $5? The $1? The coins? 78.77 million. Look at here. Look at here. Look at here. We spent almost $100 million to produce new notes. But we were lied to. We were lied about being security proofed, counterfeit proof. And now we are being told a new $100 note will be introduced come December of 2024. The governor of the central bank must tender his resignation. This is incompetency of the highest order. I know what is even more alarming. The central bank is a lodge. They live in secrecy. So they don't want to tell Trinidad and Tobago what the new note, what the new $100 banknote, Dr. Bodoe, will cost you and me, us, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, after we have spent $100 million almost in 2019 for new $100 polymer notes. Why must we accept that kind of incompetence, mismanagement? Why? Somebody must take the fall. Somebody must be accountable. Somebody must be responsible. Somebody must be culpable. The buck stops with the governor of the central bank. You are responsible for monetary policy. You are responsible for the printing of notes and coins under the Central Bank Act. So don't come and tell me you ain't know. You must bear full responsibility for this debacle facing Trinidad and Tobago. And Governor of the Central Bank, tell Trinidad and Tobago, what will it cost us to introduce this new $100 banknote come December 2024? Tell Trinidad and Tobago, what will it cost us? And the last thing I want to deal with is the donkey logic of the Attorney General. The donkey logic of the Minister of the Attorney General. You know, there was an article in the Trinidad Newsday dated Thursday, April the 11th. The editorial reads, A.G. Armour's absurd position. Look at here. A.G. Armour's absurd position. You see it? Look at here. I don't know what is wrong with the Attorney General. I can't tell you. What I can tell you, however, is that something cannot be wrong in Barbados and right in Trinidad. The same issue. It cannot be wrong in Barbados and right in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Hagee, Trinidad and Tobago must recognize, the people that is, that there are certain players in the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago that are responsible, accountable, and culpable, and must be taken. They must be brought to justice for the kidnapping and abduction of Brent Thomas. I am awaiting the revelation in the documents that have been demanded by Mr. Thomas's lawyer in Barbados from the Attorney General of Barbados, who in Trinidad and Tobago, which ministers, who are the ministers who got on the phone and called up Barbados, and instructed them or misled them or misguided them into kidnapping, abducting, putting in a cage, handcuffing, and then flying our citizen Brent Thomas unlawfully out of Barbados to Trinidad and Tobago. Who were the ministers responsible? Let us know. Was the Attorney General involved in this escapade? Mr. Attorney General, could you tell Trinidad and Tobago what role, if any, you played in this matter? Could Dr. Amory Brown, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and CARICOM Affairs, or Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, tell Trinidad and Tobago what role, if any, did you play in this debacle involving Brent Thomas? We would like the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security to clear the air on what role, if any, they played in this whole episode. Because Barbados has accepted liability. They have accepted responsibility. They are now negotiating with Brent Thomas's lawyers to pay damages that could amount to millions of dollars. But we have an AG telling us here that he read with interest what took place in a newspaper article, resulting in the Barbadian Attorney General and the government accepting liability and responsibility. But that shouldn't surprise you. The Attorney General of our country lied in a Miami court, yet still, he's still Attorney General in Trinidad and Tobago. The Attorney General is telling us what is right in Barbados, where they have claimed and accepted responsibility for the kidnapping of Brent Thomas. He's saying that is wrong in Trinidad and Tobago. So Barbados said it was wrong, rather, for them to do what they did. The Attorney General is probably telling us it was right. And therefore he's continuing his onward march at the appeal court level. And then you know what is even more alarming, ladies and gentlemen? The police service. The officer who was in charge of this transaction. in which a citizen was kidnapped, hijacked, abducted, brought back to Trinidad and Tobago. The government recently approved that person to become a deputy commissioner of police in Trinidad and Tobago. So, an unlawful act, according to Barbados, was created in Barbados. In Trinidad and Tobago, the person purportedly heading the team of officers with responsibility for that action is promoted by the government. Something is wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Something is wrong. So our government, the government of this country, seem to be promoting unlawful conduct and behavior at some of the highest levels within various important institutions under our Constitution. That is what is taking place. And before I bring my contribution this morning to a close, I want to bring to the nation's attention information that has begun to circulate. It concerns a minister It concerns a senior government minister whose name I would not call this morning, but who would know himself. At a recent function held a few months ago, information reaching me, and I call on that minister to clear the air on this piece of information that has reached my ears, that at a function, the minister in question gifted, may I repeat? Gifted a Rolex watch, Dr. Bodoe, valued at $1 million to a contractor. Not the contractor gifting to the minister a Rolex watch, you know. The minister gifting to the contractor in public at a function a Rolex watch, which he boasted cost approximately $1 million. Minister, could you step forward? Minister, could you step forward and confess your sin against this nation? Whilst they are calling on you and me, us, to pay property tax, that criminal property tax. And whilst they are calling on you and me to pay higher water rates and higher electricity rates and high and explosive and exponential increases in the cost of living, a minister in this PNM cabinet and government is gifting to a contractor a Rolex watch valued at approximately $1 million. Dr. Rowley, what say you? Are you aware of this? And what are you doing about it, if you are aware of it? I call on this minister who is conscious of what he did to please confess your sin to the country and then take up your papers and walk. Take up your bag and go. tender your resignation immediately. And the police should have an interest in this matter. The FIU should have an interest in this matter. The Integrity Commission should have an interest in this matter. These are very, very serious times that we are experiencing. So many murders in this country. Heading towards another 600 possibly at the rate that we are going. Over 45 murders every month. And a minister is gifting a Rolex watch to a contractor for approximately $1 million. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, I want to pause at this time and to invite you to raise any questions that Dr. Bodoe and myself addressed during our presentations this morning, and we will seek to respond to your inquiries or your questions to the best of our ability. So we will now pause at this time and allow the media to ask any questions they may wish to ask.
I have some questions for Dr. Bodoe first. First, given your many years of experience as a doctor and administrator, can you outline the steps you would take if you were minister or head of the hospital administration with regard to the deaths of the 7 babies?
So, thank you for that. Thank you for that question. Yes, so this is a very, very serious matter. This has made the newspaper, the headlines from Thursday night on TV straight up to this morning. In fact, this matter is so serious that this morning on the front pages of all 3 newspapers, we see where a class action is being contemplated by Freedom Law Chambers. And if I can just refer to the Sunday Express, and just to say that Freedom Law Chambers, led by Senior Counsel Anand Ram Logan, has in fact delivered a pre-action protocol letter to the NWRH's Chief Executive Officer, representing the parents of the 7 deceased babies. And it goes on to further state that we hereby give notice that we intend to file an unprecedented class action claim for medical negligence based on the mass death of 7 innocent babies at the Port of Spain General Hospital. So this indeed is a very critical event. As Minister of Health, you would have expected that you would expect transparency and accountability. It would appear, and again, we are reading here in the newspaper, and again I quote, it is clear that these deaths was quietly swept under the carpet by the Ministry of Health, a very serious allegation, ladies and gentlemen, the Northwest Regional Health Authority. And it goes on to say, but for the expose in the Trinidad Express newspaper and the TV6 News, the public would not have known about these serious incidents. In fact, one of the newspapers also recalls where a mother whose baby was in that NICUD did not know about the deaths until she read about it in the newspapers. So I think the whole issue of transparency and accountability is at stake here. So as the minister, you would expect that an independent investigation would be conducted into this. And this is what is required to restore faith. Obviously these parents have lost faith in the public system. They have lost faith in the proposed investigation, which is an internal investigation under the watch of the Chief Medical Officer. I want to go on to say, and again, I want to bring bring into the focus this report, which was produced in 2013 on the People's Partnership Government. And the reason I bring that is that when the People's Partnership Government, under then Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar, inherited government, in the health sector, there was a situation with unacceptable maternal mortality rates where pregnant women, were dying at an unacceptable rate by international standards. And in fact, in March of 2011, following one such death, the then Honorable Prime Minister caused to be constituted a committee, an independent committee with professionals across the board to investigate this particular matter. And from that, there have been several recommendations which have improved care. So I think it is very important that this government consider, as called for by my colleague as well, Senator Mark, consider that this should not be an internal, you have to have an internal investigation, of course, but to restore faith and confidence in the public, we need to have an independent inquiry into this matter.
I have a follow-up question on that, which is that with regard to any independent investigation, what are your hopes for it, given the damaging findings of the Simango report on the handling of COVID, whose recommendations you said were not implemented?
Well, yeah, it is quite interesting that, long after that report was made public, there's several recommendations that are yet to be implemented. And some of these speak to the lack of resources, human resources in the health sector. The doctors who worked, for example, the doctors who worked during the COVID were promised that they'd be given, in fact it was recommended that they be re-employed. Many of those doctors are yet to be re-employed. There was the issue again of the shortage of nurses when we speak about the nurse to patient ratio, and that is yet to be corrected. So several months after this report has made public, there are many of these recommendations yet to be made, to be implemented. So I don't hold very much hope that any such recommendations, will be implemented. But we give the government, and we give the Ministry of Health the benefit of the doubt. But at the very least, an independent investigation should be commissioned into this matter. And we, as an opposition, looking out, for the healthcare aspects of the population, will monitor the situation very, very closely.
You had indicated that it's wrong for Minister Dayal Singh to take credit for personally turning around infant mortality rates from 2016. But isn't it true that infant mortality has fallen under his watch?
Well, I'm not entirely sure it has fallen under his watch. The thing about it is that, it's, I don't want to use the wrong word here, but, a minister is responsible for policy, right? And at the end of the day, you're responsible for policy. One doesn't expect a minister to be hands-on, dealing with, maternal mortality or neonatal mortality. But this minister takes it upon himself at every opportunity to take personal credit. But if you allow me to refer to the data from UNICEF, UNICEF is the United Nations. It's one of the bodies that deals with children's health, and therefore these statistics are from UNICEF. They are not, it's not my statistics, it's not, Senator Mark didn't just write these down for me. These are statistics from UNICEF. And the neonatal mortality rate I have in front of me here from 2010 for a few years subsequent. And these are the deaths per 1,000 live births. This is how it is recorded. We have approximately now about 12 to 13,000 live births in Trinidad and Tobago. So in 2010, this is when the partnership inherited the government, the death rate was 14.4. In 2011, it was 14.0. In 2012, it's 13.6. So we are seeing here over a 3-year period, there has already been a decrease. And if you look, so 2013, 13.2, remember this report I'm speaking about was implemented, was in 2013 thereabouts. So and you see 2014, 12.8, and you see 2015, 12.4. So when the partnership left government, there was already a decrease. So the Minister Singh would have inherited, a situation that he had to build upon. I am not sure, what would have been done in terms of the years subsequent to 2015, but the minister, of course, claims that, he's made improvements. But now we are faced with a situation where the minister, having boasted of these tremendous and remarkable improvements, now we are faced with a situation where we have this tragic death of 7 infants. Surely that's not acceptable.
Final question for Dr. Bodoe. Can you confirm whether the Parliament gave you a reason for rejecting your motion of urgent importance on Friday about the death of the 7 children? And is this similar to when the Parliament rejected the opposition's urgent motions to discuss COVID-19 in early 2020?
Ladies and gentlemen, coming on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic and what transpired in terms of the transparency and the accountability of this government, we as an opposition became very wary when this news came on Thursday night. And therefore we took the precaution of ensuring that at the first available opportunity in the Parliament, which would have been last Friday, that we utilize all the avenues available to us as members of Parliament in the opposition to try and bring some information to the public, who by now would have been very distressed about this news, having woken up to it on Friday morning in all 3 newspapers. And those measures would have included urgent questions, which we filed, which was not answered properly. The minister deferred to a ministerial statement. But the other very valuable tool, and Member Senator Mark here will support me, having been a Speaker of the House himself at the previous time, that one of the avenues available to us as opposition MPs is an avenue called you file for an urgent matter of public importance, which gives us the opportunity on the same sitting at 6 p.m. that evening to debate a very burning issue. And we took that step. The leader of the opposition, would have sanctioned that step to give the Parliament an opportunity to debate, and by extension, to allow the public of Trinidad and Tobago to understand clearly. It would have been a good opportunity for the Minister of Health to come forward and explain what was happening. I am not going to question, obviously, I follow the rules of the Parliament, and of course we have to accept the rulings of the Parliament. So, I defer to that. But I'm just making the point that we thought that this is very important going forward, to have it debated at the earliest possible opportunity, in the knowledge that, what happened in the time of COVID, in terms of the opportunities to raise very pertinent and pressing matters in the Parliament.
Thank you. I have some questions for Senator Mark at this time. One of the questions here is, can you clarify whether the TTRA is the body that will implement the property tax?
Yes, once the TTRA is functioning and has been operationalized, that is the body or institution that will be called upon under the law to implement and obviously be like the collecting agency for the property tax. And it is important to note that as we speak, sections of that TTRA Act is under challenge at the Court of Appeal. And it is rather unfortunate that this concept of the committee between organs of state, where you don't interfere in my affairs and I don't interfere in your affairs, ought to have been observed. But in this instance, the government has breached that particular concept. So they have brought, as I said, these 3 nominees for approval at the level of the Parliament, knowing full well they have the majority, and knowing full well that the TTRA or sections of it are currently before the Court of Appeal.
So, given that, if the TTRA is not fully operational, is it that the property tax is not able to be collected? And do you think this is why the government is so determined to implement the TTRA instead of simply reforming the Board of Inland Revenue?
Well, I would say that in the interim, whilst they are seeking to address this matter, parties that are involved in this matter at the level of the court, the Board of Inland Revenue still exists. So if you notice, all the assessment notices that have been issued have not been issued by the TTRA. They have been issued by the Board of Inland Revenue. And all the questions and or queries that are being made by members of the public are not being directed at the TTRA. It is being directed at the Board of Inland Revenue. So I think that there's a kind of hybrid situation, because when that matter is finally addressed at the level of the law lords, we don't know where it will go. But let's assume it is struck down, then the entire act will become unworkable. So I think the government is operating on a hybrid kind of arrangement as we speak.
Another question, Senator Mark, is that with regard to the new currency that's being introduced, did the government ever state whether the switch to polymer notes was successful in undermining the strength of the underground economy and the counterfeit trade and organized crime as they claimed it would?
Well, we have never seen a report published or any statement made by the Prime Minister, who was at the forefront, Stuart Young, then Minister of National Security, the Minister of Finance. Nobody has issued a statement indicating that the effort at demonetization in 2019 has resulted in the country saving through this effort $100 million. They never said anything. So we don't know what was saved. They came on the pretext of financial crimes. But no report came to the population to justify the action taken by the government, and no results were published to show in monetary terms, in value terms, how much monies were confiscated as a result of the demonetization. What I can tell you, however, is that there is a 2020 Central Bank annual report where the governor of the central bank boasted about this initiative and also justified it by talking to the issue of financial crimes. But even though he talked about the issue of financial crimes, he too did not elaborate to provide us with any perspectives as to what were the savings for the people of Trinidad and Tobago by their action that resulted, as you recall, in mass inconvenience and dislocation to the citizenry of our nation.
And finally, there has been talk about this and questions about the new currency, about asking, whether anybody is aware who has a contract for producing these new currency notes. I don't know if you have any.
What we do know is that the company that produces the notes is a company located in England, contracted by the central bank. But I understand, but we don't have the evidence, that company that has been in existence since in the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in 1876 or thereabouts, it came into existence. And they do work for not only central banks, but government as well, right? And business. However, our information is that they have an agent in Trinidad and Tobago. We don't know as we speak the name of the agent. So could you imagine if we spent as a nation close to $100 million on the demonetization and the creation, the new design of the polymer notes in 2019 and the minting of coins in 2019, the agents or agent for that particular foreign company that is based in the United Kingdom would have gotten a commission. So it would be really interesting to find out the name or names of the agent or agents and the quantum of commission they would have received as a result of this development that took place in 2019 that cost us overall. I want to tell you, just for the notes and the coins, it cost us $77.78 million. So around 78 million. But there were other things in the equation that we have to add up. And when we add up all those other items, it came up to about 100 million total. So we need to know what percentage of that 100 million went toward the agent of this foreign company as a commission. We don't have that information, but we intend to pursue it.
Thank you. No more questions.
Okay, well, members of the media, thank you so very much for joining us this morning. And as we enter into the afternoon period, thank you for coming out in your to this press conference, this press briefing this morning, as I said, into this afternoon. And to let you know, and we want to invite you to our Monday night cottage meeting, which is taking place in the Maruga Tableland constituency. I think it is at the Lengua TIA Primary School on Monday, which is tomorrow. So our key speaker, of course, will be the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisasa, and it begins at 7 p.m. So we invite one and all throughout the country to attend this very important cottage meeting that takes place tomorrow in the Maruga Tableland constituency of Sister Michelle Benjamin, Member of Parliament, and the cottage meeting will take place at the Lengua TIA Primary School beginning at 7 p.m. promptly. So we look forward to seeing you there tomorrow evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the United National Congress, the alternative government, the government in waiting, the incoming government, we would like to thank you, members of the media, the viewing public, both at home and abroad. I want to thank my colleague, Member of Parliament for Fyzabad, and our Shadow Minister of Health, the Honorable Dr. Bodoe, Lackram Bodoe, for being with us and with you this morning. And we bid you a very productive, rewarding, and safe afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.